Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. This is a weekly podcast for anyone who loves The Simpsons, or ever has loved The Simpsons, hosted by two dudes that grew up on The Simpsons. My name is Miles, better known as Mr. Most Days Off, and today we bring you the end of another season of The Simpsons. We're going to be reviewing, or doing, our Season 9 finale Spectacular. And right there, joining me as always, of course, your co-host with the most spectacular most. That was two uses of most. Whatever. Your co-host with the most. It's Richie the Whiz Kid.
It's exciting times, Miles. These are really fun to do, I feel like. I like reflecting on the season. I like the drama of the top 5, bottom 1.
That's a little bit torture for me personally, but they're still fun. It's
interesting how they change over the seasons too, and about like how they were so easy early on, and every year they get more and more difficult. But we're gonna get into that. I need to throw it back to you so we can get going. The man, the myth, the Sir Loves a Lot. Is Miles.
You know, I will agree with you that they are getting more difficult as we go further along. I don't know that I would ever have said that they are easy. I've struggled even since the beginning.
You have. The first couple seasons were a piece of cake, but yeah,
In hindsight, I would love to go back to the first couple seasons, because as we were getting on the air today, I was like, oh shit, I'm still at 8.
Which I have stuff to talk about with the top 5, bottom 1, but it kind of bleeds into the Mike Scully-ness of the season, so we're gonna get there eventually.
Interesting. Usually you're the one that's like biting at the bit here to get me to get my top 5, bottom 1 out, but you're ready to talk about some other stuff this time, huh?
I don't play that game no more, buddy.
That was a good time. Good time toying with Richie. All right, well, if you don't want to talk about the top 5, bottom 1, what do you want to talk about today, Rich?
Well, I feel like we need to just dive right in and talk about the differences in the season over the last year. And how did you feel about the season, man?
You know, it's hard just to like look back over each of these episodes as I was doing to try to get my top 5, bottom 1. And this season 9 is still one of those seasons that very much you look at every single episode and it's like, oh my god, I remember this one, and I remember this one, and I remember this one so well. And there's only one episode on this season that I thought I remembered as something else that was also a good episode, but it's just incredible how iconic all of these still are, and that's 9 seasons deep. My
biggest season reflect is that we are completely out of whack the entire time.
Oh man, this from scheduling standpoint, this season was nuts. Like we did so many out of date episodes. Like we recorded episodes in the complete wrong order and tried to keep it chronological, which can be kind of difficult at times, honestly. Especially when we're referencing conversations we may or may not have had yet, according to people who heard it.
Yeah, that was the absolute tough part, where it's like, can we mention this? I don't remember if we've talked about this yet, and or if we will talk about this. But I mean, I remember there was a time where we changed to record a different episode the following day, and I was like 3/4 of the way through taking notes, and you texted me and you're like, "Hey, we're going back to this episode tomorrow." I'm like, no,
but
okay.
I
already have my notes done for that one then.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't have to do extra work, really. Maybe more at the time, but it was all worth it because we got some pretty sweet guests in along the way for this one, and that was literally the reason that we changed, like, every single, every time we recorded out of order, it was to accommodate a guest. And we had some really cool guests.
If there's ever a time where, like, I get frustrated for a split second with something like that, I sit there and I'm like, Richie, you're taking notes about The Simpsons, like... Yes, it's homework, but at the same time, it's like if
this is the class you wanted in college.
Yeah, exactly. If Child You saw you right now being upset about this for a split second, he would be very upset with you.
I'm very disappointed in you, Richie. I'm gonna have to start calling you Richard.
Oh,
yeah, for sure.
But I also, is this where we want to talk about like the fan reaction to Mike Scully, or do we want to tease that for now?
No, we can talk about that. I guess let's first mention that we always reference on these finale spectacular episodes. There's a Splitsider article years and years ago. I don't even know what year it was at this point because they've actually no longer have the article up, but you can still find the graph that they have that has the jokes per minute per episode based on the different eras of showrunners. And first of all, I just think it's kind of crazy that we're actually in the 5th out of 6 known eras of The Simpsons. So, like, the way they break it down, the Sam Simon era was seasons 1 and 2. Al Jean and Mike Reese were 3 and 4. David Merkin was 5 and 6. Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein were 7 and 8, and then Mike Scully, who we just had him on for Trash of the Titans, and we're currently in his era, which covers seasons 9, 10, and 11 before the reins get passed back to Al Jean, who has been at the helm since season 12 till current. So it's crazy that, like, if you break it down like that, we're already on the next to last era.
I was going to say, yeah, and even though that last era is super, super long. And Mike
not
Scully
necessarily the last, either. We don't know that, to be certain.
That's true. And if you look at the graph, Mike Scully clearly has the most jokes of any season, like I told him in person. It totally isn't wrong.
Yeah, you did miss in our interview with him. I didn't want to call you out, but honestly, you're not, like, far off. It's not like there's a significant dip, but actually the peak of jokes per minute is actually still to come in the Al Jean era from season 12 and on, though there's a lot of criticism of the new era Simpsons that a lot of those jokes are of the, like, pop culture reference. Like, that's why they're so much quicker, is because they're kind of for the, like, Adderall era.
Meta self-referential is the term I see a lot.
Right. Whereas what I think you were referencing with Mike Scully is he's often the showrunner. It's not like he's blamed per se, but a lot of times people do consider his era of the show to be where the significant slide in quality occurs. And actually, I think Vulture magazine, who did an article on the eras of The Simpsons in 2012, has a pretty good little word bite here. They basically say, despite Scully's superb talent and the show's lasting quality, observers point to these seasons as the start of the series' transitions towards a meta stage of blatant self-referential humor.
There we go again, right there.
Boom.
That's what I was just talking about. All right, Miles. So... agree, disagree. I'm sure there's a lot of wiggle room in the middle there we're going to talk about. I mean, how do you feel about all that? So
what I was actually going to say on that is before I started reading that article, I was just coming up with, like, some of our talking points or general conversation points for this podcast that we're currently recording. And one of the things that we usually do on these is we just kind of talk about what defines Mike Scully. Like, we talked about David Merkin, and he's, known for his dark humor. Even you had the segment Merkin Moments, which I absolutely loved during his reign. We talked about how Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein, like, their humor and love, like their clear love for the world of The Simpsons. Like, they had, like, such a respect for what was done before them. And in a lot of ways, I feel like Mike Scully doesn't necessarily get as much credit as he deserves in that degree, because what I had wrote down is how I would define Mike Scully is the glue. And I don't mean that. I know we're actually going to be talking next week about Phil Hartman, who is famously nicknamed the Glue because he was just known to keep every scene he was in essentially to make it work and to keep the thing on track. But what I mean by Mike Scully as being the glue is I feel like he was given essentially a beautiful piece of art that had been shredded into pieces. And I don't mean that necessarily in a bad way. I just mean that every time a showrunner comes aboard and kind of puts their own take on it, they're kind of like, are taking away a piece of what was originally there. And Mike Scully is handed all of these pieces, and he's got to be like, hey, this world that has now been ultra defined all the way through its side characters. And oh, by the way, they've pretty much traveled everywhere, and Homer's gotten, like, every weird job you can think of at this point. But also, the fans love it, and you need to keep making more of it. And he was able to
and
take
the show
that.
might be done by the end of the year because they never thought they were going to get renewed over and over again.
Multiple times, I would have to say he's thinking he's working towards the series finale.
Yeah. So is this the downfall of The Simpsons?
I mean, so far, absolutely not. Going through season 9, I think that's a ridiculous statement, personally. I mean, Just looking back at I don't want to like lean into my top 5 bottom 1, so I'll go chronologically real quick. But look at, I mean, the city of New York versus Homer Simpson. A lot of people are very, it's controversial, I'll say, The Principal and the Pauper, so I'll skip over that one, even though I did like that episode. Lisa Sachs, there's a great Treehouse of Horror, The Cartridge Family, Bart Star, the Pooh episode where he's got to, deal with his arranged marriage. I'm just going through, like, that's just, like, the first 7 episodes, and those are all classics, in my opinion. And it keeps going on from there.
See, I feel like the back half of the season's
stronger.
Much more stronger.
I will say most of my top 5 comes from the back half of the season.
Agreed. So that's our tease for that. I want to get my 2 cents in on this Scully thing, because this has been a point that we knew was coming for a very long time, that we were going to have to tackle this thought process when we got to this point in the show. And I want to say, I feel like in all seasons past, there's like 1, maybe 2, but definitely 1 episode that's like the standout, like Hank Scorpio is here episode, where it's like, this is an iconic Simpsons episode that makes the show what it is, and this is the golden age, and this is that. And I will say, I don't feel that this season has that episode.
That's a good point.
However, I feel like this is the first season where every episode was way above average for a Simpsons episode. Like, all these episodes are very entertaining and very enjoyable. And every season past, there's been 1 or 2 episodes where I'm like, I really don't care for this particular episode. And my bottom 1, I only have to pick between like 2 episodes. This was the most difficult time I've had picking a bottom 1. I have 5 episodes written down, and I was like, man, I kind of like all these episodes. I just got to pick the one I like the least out of all these. And I was like, man, I kept going through the list going, all these episodes are very above average Simpsons episodes. And that sounds like a slight, but it's not. I'm just like, I feel like Mike Scully takes a lot of crap for something that has absolutely nothing to do with him. Like, yeah. I very much enjoyed this season as a whole. Now, again, like I just said, there's no Hank Scorpio moment for this season, and those are always going to stand out in our head. But also, we've had 25 years to reflect on episodes like that, so of course they're going to be this Goliath in our mind, and those are never going to be toppled.
I mean, that's hard, episode. Right? It's hard to beat some of those huge heavy hitters. It's almost like what you're describing, and I'll see if I can do this. This is really your thing, but putting in like baseball terms, you're saying that like Bill Oakley, Josh Weinstein, David Merkin, those are guys that you put up at the plate that are very likely going to hit consistently and might hit a home run, versus you're seeing Mike Scully as someone who's just got an incredible on base average, like always putting something worthwhile.
Yeah, maybe like you put Scully in the leadoff spot because he's going to consistently get on base for you, and then the other guys are going to drive him in and let him score. So yeah, exactly. That's a good one. Good job, Miles.
Thanks, man. I think this kind of backs up your point just a little bit. That same 2012 Vulture article that I referenced earlier, I actually went to and was trying to give like each season the one episode that defines it. So season 1, they did Crepes of Wrath. Season 2, what did they do for season 2? I skipped over. 2 Cars in Every Garage, 3 Eyes on Every Fish. 3 was Stark Raving Dad. 4 was Marge vs. the Monorail. 5 was Deep Space Homer. 6, Homie the Clown. 7, 22 short films about Springfield. 8 was actually Lisa's Date with Density, which I thought was an odd one for their list so far, but that they put Girly Edition for season 9. How do you feel about that as being the defining episode for his era?
I can tell you,
or for this season, I should say.
None of the episodes they listed were I don't even like my top 3 on any of my lists. So that just shows you that everybody can have a different opinion.
True.
Girly Edition, I feel like gets most of its credit, if not all of it, from the Mojo part, from the B plot. Like, I told you when we were recording it, I didn't even remember that it was the newscasting episode. I just remember the Mojo part and didn't realize that those two were part of the same episode. So I don't think that's the defining episode of this season. If I had to pick a defining episode, and again, not to use top 5, this is not my top episode, but I would think 2 episodes that stand out in everyone's mind a lot more are Joyous Sect and Lisa the Skeptic.
Yeah, I would definitely think that tracks. So, we're talking about Scully in general, and we talked about like the Merkin moments, and you did, what did you do for Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein's era? I remember I liked it. I just can't remember what it was.
Well, that notepad is way over. That was like, was it heartfelt moments or
something like that? Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
It's Merkin moments just rolls off the tongue, and it's hard to come up with stuff like that with the other showrunners.
That's fair. But do you have anything that you feel like defines Scully enough that you're able to come up with some moments that you appreciate from him?
I did that's a wrap with Scully.
I like
it. That's a wrap is that like there's times where they're doing so much, and like there's even episodes that don't have B plots a lot in the season, but there's times where they just kind of forgot to tie up some loose ends.
Okay.
So something a little different here. And with Mike Scully, we have a few episodes in this season where you're like, why isn't Homer in jail? Like they just kind of forgot about all the stuff Homer did throughout the episode because he was kind of just a side character. And we just talked about it, but like the Mojo part, he left a pretty abused animal at the doorsteps of the place he got it from, and he never had any repercussions for that. So bad, Homer. You're not supposed to do that, but it doesn't matter because that's a wrap. Then we also had the Trouble with Trillions one. I don't know why that one really bothered me.
I feel like there's a lot of issues that are left unheld or not revolved or resolved. Damn it, I can't talk. Words are hard.
But yeah, like Homer helped like a traitor to the country get out of the country, and then they just float back in, I guess, and everything's fine, and it doesn't matter. And the ending, the dumbbell indemnity, where like Homer escaped from prison and had no repercussions. They never went and arrested him. Everything was fine. Don't worry about it, Homer. You'll be good. And like the biggest symbol of that would be, I think, the end of Das Bus, where the kids get saved. I don't know, Mo. Like doesn't matter, Miles.
Yeah,
that's a wrap.
I kind of dig that, yeah. And there's a lot of those moments that they're either like we always talk about, like the Simpsons reset, so to speak, and yeah, some of them it definitely seemed like they came like 15 seconds before the end credits in this season.
Yeah, exactly. But there's a lot of that. I mean, you could kind of push some of the stuff like even the King of the Hill one, where he just kind of let's slide down this corpse at the end. But this is going to sound odd. That was a little better planned, I think, a little more. A little more tying the loose knots together.
Sure, I'll give you that. Yeah,
but that's a wrap, Miles.
I like that. That's smart. And kind of just while we're still on the Mike Scully like conversation, first of all, let's just point out that regardless of how you feel about The Simpsons, or his era of The Simpsons, seems like it worked out okay for him because, he went on to do great things like Everyone Loves Raymond and Parks and Recreation, and currently Duncanville with Amy Poehler on Fox, which is fantastic. So, that all kind of worked out just fine. But I will say this too. You pointed out there's no like one defining heavy hitter episode of season 9. As I look out at season 10, and we'll talk a little bit more about those episodes later, but the first thing I do notice is there are far less episodes that just by the title alone, I remember exactly what there are. Like there are definitely a few of them, don't get me wrong. There's some big ones in there, but there are more episodes in this season than any other before it that I'm looking at some of the titles and I'm like, what is that one about?
I feel like that's going to become more prominent the further along we get in this podcast, because that happened to me just when we were doing our last show when I completely forgot to look at the list and I was doing it on the podcast and I was like, outside of Cartridge Family, I don't even really remember any of these other ones. But then as we start watching them, it's like instantaneous. As soon as you start watching it, it's click.
Season 9, I still felt pretty like, well, I knew them when I just saw the title. But like I said, I mean, season 10, even with the very few exceptions, like one of them's like Maximum Homer Drive. How do you forget that? But
exactly, yeah.
Even and like Sunday Cruddy Sunday is another one. But like there are far less of those on this one than there are ones that I'm like, oh yeah, exactly. And I'm sure you're right. I'm sure there's many of them that I'm gonna like, turn on once and be like, oh yeah, I've seen this one a million times.
Well, before we get moving on to this next part, I want to bring up one more point here about Scully, where I feel like maybe people think that the show loses some of its things that it had in previous season, and in particular maybe its heart, where it's trying to be a little more funny and a little less heartfelt. But I mean, we just did this episode 2 weeks ago, but like lost our Lisa, man. Like, how can you say the show doesn't have as much heart after watching the ending of that episode?
The third act alone put that one in contention for my top 5.
Yeah, right? Like, I had that one written down, and I don't know as a kid if I even would have written that one down as a possibility of being in my top 5, but like, oh my gosh, it was such a beautiful ending to that one. So this show clearly still has everything that it needs to make it what quote unquote people call the Simpsons or the golden age. And like, it's still there. You just have to quit listening to all that extra chatter out there and just decide for yourself. And like, I mean, we're just two guys talking about it ourselves, and you know, it doesn't matter in the retrospect to a listener determining what is the golden age and what isn't. And I think that's kind of the point, is like, don't let everyone else talk you into believing something. Just figure it out for yourselves.
There's sure, that's huge.
So many good episodes in the show, and I guarantee you there's still so many good episodes in the future for us to talk about. I mean, why would the show be on for over 600 episodes if that wasn't the case? Unless, people
maybe,
just leave it on.
For our season 10 finale spectacular, or another like just tween episode at some point, we should talk about like maybe the eras of the Simpsons as they're defined through social media at the time, because I'm thinking that if Twitter doesn't exist, or whatever, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is that's happening at in 2006 or whatever it is, whenever the decline starts to happen, supposedly, whatever it is, right? Like, how much more or how much easier was it for people to like suddenly get online and have like other people force their opinions upon them at those eras? Like, I'm thinking that maybe the decline in the popularity of the show also increased with the people being able to trash it online.
Yeah, it's got a direct correlation of when Twitter started.
And again, I'm not trying to individually call out Twitter, but I'm saying
go ahead.
The season 10 finale spectacular, like, we should definitely like just kind of maybe think about reflecting on that a little bit, putting a little research into that. I love Twitter for what it's worth. Follow us. I'm at Mr. Most Days Off, and the show's at Best Darn Diddly, and he's rarely there, but if you tag him, he'll respond at thewiz_kid23.
We're going to have our historian put a bookmark on this moment so that we remember it for the next spectacular.
Did you just volunteer to be the historian? Because that would be amazing.
No, I said we're going to get our historian to do it.
Okay, that means me then. Got it.
Oh, no, I thought it was that dude in the background. That's been you the whole time?
Yep, I'm Mojo. Kill me. Yeah.
Pray for Miles.
Pray for Miles, yeah, that's it. Pray for Mojo. Right on, man. So, we've talked about it a lot. I think that there's no doubt that we both have nothing but love for Mike Scully. Again, it was so great having him on the show and talking about Trash of the Titans with us. And I think, at this point, and season 9 at least, through his first trimester with the show, if you will, he's still doing a fantastic job of bringing us quality entertainment week to week.
I also want to throw it out there in case anyone, to cover the other side of the debate here, is like, I want to just straight up throw it out there and say, I think we are biased because we literally talked to the people that were in charge of doing this. So
that's
yes,
fair.
Like,
yeah.
I'm going to be biased in that direction, but like,
when someone like that is so kind to give you the time of their day to come and talk about essentially what is their work, I guess that is going to maybe bias our opinions a little bit, but like,
is funny, and like, I think his stuff is funny too. So
I legitimately love Dunk. I've continued to watch that show since we've talked to him. It's a really funny show. I'll even say it now. I mean, I think you and I both talked about it when we first watched the first episode. We were kind of like, but like, that's so true to a lot of episodes. Look at the first episode of The Simpsons
and the first episode of Rick and Morty.
Right. I mean, they're always just. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to find your footing and to get to know the characters well enough to find their antics hilarious. But Duncanville is quality stuff. And then I don't know if you watched the Parks and Recreation like reboot that they just did for COVID recently. It was fantastic, and it just reminded me of how great that show was.
Man, and like, how many people can honestly say they think that the first season of Parks and Rec is fantastic?
Dude, I almost quit watching. I didn't fall into that show until literally the first episode of season 2, and same with The Office, for what it's worth. The Dundies is the only. I almost quit watching, but then I decided to watch one more episode of season 2, and it was the Dundee episode. And the Dundee episode is still to date my favorite episode of The Office.
That is a fantastic episode. But yeah, it's point proven right there. Like you got to give shows time to flesh out their characters and get going. And like by episode 3 of Duncanville, and I know you love the second episode, but episode 3 was great in Duncanville, and then episode 4, the Witch Day one, is just like
I realized in a
so
rewatch why I
great.
like the second one so much more, and you weren't really digging it. I'm actually way into the B plot of the second episode. It's the dad is basically being forced to throw out all his like rock and roll memorabilia, and that hits, dude, because I'm a collector. So like I hate having to throw I hate having to throw shit out. So like I realized on my second watch through that was why I connected with that episode so much more than you did.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I guess maybe I'm a witch, and that's why I connected the Witch Day episode. I don't know. I guess I'd be a warlock.
Man, this is when we look back on our historian will have to mark this as the start of our Duncanville podcast. But for now, we'll go ahead and get back to The Simpsons. We are doing our season 9 finale spectacular, and it is
Spectacular.
It is time for our top 5 bottom 1 episodes of the season. I'm going to go ahead and make a bold prediction right now. I think we're going to have the least amount of crossover on this season than we have on any season prior.
I can totally see that.
Yeah. Maybe we'll find out, I guess. But for right now, Rich, what do you want to do? You want to do the bottom 1 first? You want to go in order? How do you want to do this?
We usually do the top 5 first, but I kind of want to like leave on a happier note this year. So I feel like we should do our bottom 1 first and get that out of the way.
All right. Would you like to start, or would you like me to talk about my bottom 1 episode of season 9?
Well, I threw this out there, so I guess I should back up what I said and go first then and do it, right?
Go for it, brother.
So I stressed this earlier that this was the toughest one for me to do because I felt like there's really not a bad episode. And I know most people, when they do their bottom 1, is going to go with the clip show, the all singing, all dancing. But I still stand by the fact that I think that might be the best clip show ever of any show ever. And I absolutely love that episode. I don't care that everyone...
I signed your petition to raise it from a 5.0 on IMDb, man. I don't know what else I can do to support you.
But I did not even have that one written down in the 5 episodes I put as my bottom 1.
Same, actually. I looked at it for a second and thought it'd be like the easy way to go, but it's too good. I couldn't.
I went with Miracle on Evergreen Terrace.
All right.
I feel like that I don't like Bart's way he goes about things. And yeah, I know it's kind of in character, but maybe not in character, and how he just straight up lies the whole time. And I feel like it's kind of a quick resolution at the end. It does have a sweet ending, but like, I went back and forth between 5 different episodes on what I was going to put in there. Another one, just to like throw some controversy in there. I'm not a huge fan of the City of New York versus Homer Simpson, and I had that one down, but because of the Krav Kalash part and like things like that and the opening, I was like, this episode's better than I give it credit for. But I went with Miracle on Evergreen Terrace. I just feel like it's kind of, especially for a Christmas episode, it doesn't have the oomph that a lot of other episodes do. Just throw it out there. I also put like King of the Hill on there. I'm not a huge fan of that one. And I almost went with Last Temptation of Crust. I almost did, but
really?
Miracle on Evergreen Terrace.
Canyonero alone should keep it out of the bottom. The Canyonero would literally drive it out of the bottom 1.
Yeah.
Like.
Well, until it broke. Yeah, that's kind of one of the reasons why I did not go with that one. So when all was said and done, I really thought about it hard. I went with Miracle on Evergreen Terrace.
So I definitely was not with you on Last Temptation of Crust. I really enjoy that episode a lot, but it didn't even like consider the bottom 1. I will say that while I didn't pick it, Evergreen Terrace was also, or Miracle on Evergreen Terrace was also in my consideration, and a big part of it was that it's not that I don't like the episode, it's that it's just weaker in comparison to other Christmas episodes.
Yeah, that's like a huge force behind that choice.
Right. Like I still like the episode. I don't think I have a problem like you do with the way Bart acts. Like, I feel like that's totally in character. Like, I'm okay with it. I like a lot of the stuff with the neighbors and the reveal, but like just ultimately, especially when the last one was, Bone Storm, Marge Be Not Proud, which is arguably one of the best Christmas episodes of TV ever, in my opinion. And then you follow the next Christmas episode as this one. It's hard. It's another thing where it's just hard to follow in that shadow, but it still doesn't matter. It is a weaker episode, but I actually went with the Trouble with Trillions for my bottom one episode. And I'm just going to straight up say there is a good chance that, unfortunately, my viewing of this episode on this review is just tainted by the fact that I was frankly having a really bad day the day we recorded this that review, and I may not have been in the right mindset to enjoy the episode like it was intended. But at the end of the day, I just felt like the Burns and Homer like going to Cuba, like there was a lot of funny stuff there, but like I just felt like it was very dated political humor that like really doesn't hold up in a lot of ways. You know, it's not universally funny unless you happen to be familiar with like 90s foreign policy.
See, that's funny because, like, I said it during that podcast too, but I ended up enjoying that episode so much more because I thought I had such a negative connotation with it being not a good episode in my brain, and I ended up really enjoying it when we recorded. So that's interesting how we can have a different opinion on the same thing,
sure.
And our mindsets were different kind of going into it. That's very interesting.
Well, and also, I never look at the IMDb rating. I mean, I do throughout the season, but like as I'm making my top 5 bottom 1, I try to ignore the IMDb ratings, but I go and look afterwards, and I do think it's interesting that one of your considerations for bottom 1, The City of New York versus Homer Simpson, is the highest rated episode of the season according to IMDb.
I didn't look at that actual one because it was the first episode, but I saw there was one that had like a 79%. But I don't know. I feel like there's so many more episodes that are better this season than that one.
I completely concur, and I will go ahead and follow that up by saying that one of the episodes that I think, that's going to spoil a little bit, but fuck it, who cares? One of the episodes that I think is better than The City of New York, in other words, I didn't put that in my top 5 either, is Das Bus, which I know that you were a little hard on for its ending. I crack up at that ending, and I appreciate that it's a parody of another ending.
I crack up at it. I crack up at the ending, but Miles, that's a wrap.
That is a wrap, dude. That is a wrap for sure. I've always enjoyed those types of stories, especially where it's like kids kind of like forming their own society, like Peter Pan and the Lost Boys type stuff. Like I've always enjoyed those types of like adventure stories, and this is just such a great parody for Lord of the Flies, and
Are you saying this is your number 5?
This is my number 5, Das Bus.
Okay, I don't remember you actually saying that. So
I may not have made that clear, but in my mind, yes. Okay. What I am declaring officially is my number 5 episode is Das Bus.
All right. I may or may not have had that in contention for my bottom episodes, but I'm not going to say that, even though I just did. I had too much fun with us reviewing that one, especially with Andy.
Dr. Andrew Briseño, always a blast.
It brought a lot more joy back. That's something I really love about every time Andy comes on. And I said it when we recorded with him, but he always shines a little more light on the lesser beloved episodes of a season, and that's something that I always enjoy with him coming on the show. He doesn't pick like the most favorite episode of each season. He always picks a little off the beaten path one, and that's why
I love that. I always try to encourage guests not to pick like the Hank Scorpio episode, but to pick the episode that has some unique, special meaning to them.
Well, Andy always nails it on the head. Most of our guests do, but I want to throw that out there. But Andy has got the streak going, so he's consistent with it. So there's something to be said about that. For sure. I guess you want me to go with my number 5 then.
That seems like the natural rhythm.
Here we go. Stretching it out. My top 4 was really easy for me, but my number 5 is the one that caused me issue this time. And I had episodes like Dumbbell Indemnity and Lisa the Simpson and Lost Our Lisa down there, but I ended up going with Simpsons Tide on this one. Okay. I feel like it's a lot of fun. I very much enjoy the peas scene, and I think that scene definitely thrust this episode up there much more than it's got one of the most memorable scenes of the season to me from that moment. So when all said and done, it's Homer wanting to get paid for doing very little and drinking all the time, and it's a perfect job for him.
He finds his dream job, yeah.
And even though it's got a very rushed ending that you could probably throw into That's a Wrap as well, I love him talking in all the different languages like seamlessly in.
You didn't tell me that we were doing, like, the ones we considered, so I had on mine, like, Girly Edition, Homer vs. New York, and the Cartridge Family were right there on the bubble.
You always tell us not to do that every finale Spectacularrrrrrrr.
And everybody always cheats.
we always do it anyway.
All right, well, go ahead and tell me about your number 4 then, since it was so easy.
I think my number 4, I probably would have had it 3 or 2 if we made the list the day we recorded the episode. But my number 4 was This Little Wiggy.
Okay.
I feel like I never thought I had a Ralph obsession, but like I know that the one where him and Lisa date, I think I had as my number 1 episode of the season back in like season 4. I Love Lisa or whatever.
Yep.
And there's something about the Ralph episodes where they have a little bit more heart and a little bit more discovery in them. And I just really, I really enjoyed that episode, and it's got a little bit of what you talked about with Das Bus, where it's like the kids going out and exploring, which also plays in the Lemon of Troy. There's something that just touches me, and it sounded bad, but it touches my heart a little bit when we have those moments in those episodes. So I very much enjoyed This Little Wiggy.
I agree so much that I put it at my number 3 spot, actually. 100% agree with you, yeah. And since I skipped over it, I actually put Bart Carney at number 4. A lot of that is nostalgia, and a lot of it might be because I just watched a documentary about Jim Varney, and that's fine if I'm biased, I'm sorry, but I love that episode. I love them having to like con each other at the, like con their house back at the end. I think Jim Varney does a fantastic performance as this, despicable Carney, but really Carney living by the Carney code is all he's doing.
Yeah, that's a great episode, man.
So yeah, Bart Carney at number 4, and then your number 4 was my number 3 at This Little Wiggy. So what did you put down for number 3?
Lisa the Skeptic. I touched on this earlier. It's one of the episodes that you do put your stamp on for this season, and there's a lot of great moments in that. Just a lot of my top 3 episodes are going to have very high nostalgia meters. And just I remember the first time watching this and the time that the angel spoke in that split second, you're like, what the hell? And it's just, this episode is a lot of fun, and it's still a lot of fun all these years later.
Once again, I agree so much that I put that at my number 2 spot.
I thought we were supposed to have a lot of differences.
I did, yeah. I clearly am wrong on this. That's hilarious. I guess, what's funny is our bottom, like the tail end of our bottom 5, or I'm sorry, bottom 1 and the bottom of our bottom 5 seemed like it did have a lot of discrepancy. But then as we get to these top episodes, it looks like we're a lot more in sync than I realized. So yeah, Lisa the Skeptic is my number 2.
All
for
right.
all the reasons you just said.
Well, then my number 2 is probably going to be your number 1, just to keep the tradition going here. My number 2 episode was The Joy of Sex.
Yep, you nailed it. That's my number 1 episode for sure.
There's no way you can't love this episode. I mean, and nostalgia meter high.
No, leader. I mean, it's over.
The hover bike scene is just so random, but so great. Like, and then like reverse brainwashing Willie when I joined the cult. Like, there's so much fun in this episode. I'm about to talk myself into making this the number 1, but yeah, it's just. I love Joyous Sect. I loved it when it first came out, and I love it all these years later.
When we were talking about that Vulture article earlier, you were even like, I don't like 2 into our top 5, but like I would think episodes like Lisa the Skeptic and Joy of Sect would make the list, and I'm like, I sure would agree with you.
I purposely didn't say my number 1 in that statement, but like, because I guess I need to give you room to talk a little bit in this topic.
Oh no, you're saying all the right things. Go ahead, man. I think we all love the Joy of Sect, so tell us, what is your number 1 episode?
I mean, it was already in your top 5, and I was trying to remain silent then, but I said it while we were doing the podcast, and it just held up true the whole season. I love Bart Carney. I think it's a different episode where other people may not even have it in their top 5, but like it's fun the whole way through, and it's such a simple plot, but they get so deep into the Carney lifestyle and all this other stuff, and it's Homer and Bart fun. I love Homer like outwitting him at the end, and you're waiting for this big epic throw in the last moment, and then they just run inside and they outsmart the Carneys. We were beaten by the best.
By the best.
The episode's so funny, and it's so funny about such a simple subject, and I loved it, man. Like, it's still great all these years later, and it's not going to hold up in other people's mind as much as Lisa the Skeptic and The Joy of Sect. This isn't other people's top 5, Miles. It's Richie's top 5, and it's my favorite episode of the season, so deal with it.
So just for anyone who's keeping score at home, I predicted that this was going to have the most discrepancy of any of our previous top fives, and we had our top four in the same, the top four episodes were the exact same in just a slightly tweaked order.
And remember, I said my top four were very easy to come up with. It was the fifth one was the one that was tough.
Yep. That's fair, man. Good stuff. Yeah, I think all of that speaks to a great season, because, again, I think that even the episodes that I was considering to not like, and even the episodes that you were considering to not like, were still fantastic episodes. I still very much love the Trouble with Trillions, despite watching it in a bad mood, and despite just ranking it at the worst of the season. Again, that's number 25 of a very, very stout 25 episodes.
And like I said about Mike Scully, I feel like all these episodes were way above average. Like, I just, again, didn't feel like there was the one episode that was hands and above the rest, like there are in pretty much every season past. But this episode was a very, very packed and good season, and I still very much enjoyed season 9. So again, don't listen to those people online, people. Just watch The Simpsons and love it, because that's what it's here for.
For sure. And I love doing this this season of The Simpsons on this podcast with you. This was a lot of fun, even though it was crazy and out of order, and we changed up our style a little bit with our schedules and whatnot. And I'm terrified I'm about to miss some people, so please help me if you can. But definitely want to thank all of the wonderful guests that we had. We mentioned Dr. Andrew Briseno. We also had Tom Murphy and David Diaz on the show. We had Jamie Zeski join us for an episode. Of course, we had Mike Scully from The Simpsons and from Duncanville, Parks and Recreation, Everyone Loves Raymond, all those great shows, and he took the time to talk with us for some reason. I think he just got confused at who was calling him, but it worked out. Is there any other wonderful guests that I'm missing? I feel like I'm totally leaving someone out.
Didn't we have patty cakes on like the first episode of the season?
Did we have patty? If we did, if we didn't, we should have, honestly.
I think we did I think that him and Ashes did the season 9 Spectacularrrrrrrr, and then I thought Patty came right back. Oh no, I'm sorry. Richie was in an episode, I think, and then he just had a voice issue.
We love those guys anyway, and actually, I know I have on good authority that they will be participating in our 200th episode, Richie, which, believe it or not, is just next week.
What? Already?
Yeah. Already, man. If you listen to the unedited Behind the Diddly on a few episodes back where I just forgot to cut out my mic check where Richie and I discussed, we didn't even know what we were going to be doing for that episode just a few weeks ago, but just like through random synchronicity, which I think we say a lot on this show and it just seems to always happen, but our 200th episode happens to fall chronologically in between the episodes where Phil Hartman was tragically murdered. So, for our 200th podcast, we are actually going to be doing a Phil Hartman tribute show, and that's coming up just next week.
It's going to be a somber episode, but I think it's something that it would be good to talk about.
I think it will be moments that it will definitely be somber, but I also think that Phil Hartman was just so funny and so loved by so many people that it's going to be a really positive experience. I already have a lot of people lined up that want to, provide a soundbite or just talk about their love of Phil Hartman, and yeah, I think that I don't think you're wrong, but I also think it's going to bring a lot of joy, and hopefully that will make it more of a celebration of just somebody that meant so much to our childhoods. I mean, that guy was in everything.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Miles.
Yeah.
Aw.
So speaking of things that we have to look forward to, we are going to be kicking off Season 10 very shortly. After our 200th episode, we'll be kicking off Season 10, Episode 1. Richie, just looking over the episode list, I already mentioned earlier, this is the first time where I read a lot of these and I'm like, what is that one about? But just what are some of the ones that jump out to you that you are most excited for?
Well, I did ruin 2 of your top 5 early, so you ruined 2 of my looking forwards early, so it's okay. Again, synchronicity, blah, 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 blah. We both suck at talking all the time now. This is terrible.
Yeah.
But The Wizard of Evergreen Terrace, just that one stands out in my very much so. And then I also wanted to mention Mayor to the Mob. Like, that's one that I'm looking forward to talking about, so we're going to have fun with that. and Maximum Homer Drive was such a good episode. We're gonna have fun there too. So the stuff that will be popping out in our minds that remains great just in thinking about it. And then I think I'm going to enjoy liking talking about the 30 Minutes Over Tokyo episode as well, when the Simpsons do a little more traveling. So it's going to be a fun season still, man. We got plenty to talk about in this upcoming season. And just looking at the names of it, I don't see any fall backwards from the number of great episodes and the quote-unquote decline of the show in season 10. It looks like it's still going to be going strong.
Well, and kind of in line with your point about him consistently, Mike Scully being him, having consistently above average episodes, just looking across the board at these IMDb ratings, which again, subjective, could not really matter, doesn't really mean much, but the lowest rated episode in this season coming up is a 7.0 out of 10, and that's actually Sunday Cruddy Sunday, which is the episode that Vulture magazine shows is like the defining episode of the season. So
I like that episode.
I like that episode too, or at least I remember liking it. I haven't seen it in quite some time. Maximum Homer Drive definitely was on my list of ones that immediately jump out to me. Mom and Pop Art is one that I have really fond memories of, or Le Grill. And then...
What the hell is that?
Exactly. The one, though, that probably I'm most looking forward to, and we'll see if that holds up at the end of the season, is Homer to the Max. Absolutely,
I thought
love
you were going to say
episode.
Viva Ned Flanders.
Also love that episode. See, like
season,
that's where they get married. So there's so many good things happening in season 10 that we have to look forward to. That's going to be a lot of fun. So we'll definitely be back for more Best Darn Diddly reviews of that. I guess, is there anything looking forward on our show? Are we going to change? Do you think we should try to go in order this season?
I think we should replace both the hosts.
That seems fair. That seems totally fair. I think those guys suck, but the show overall would be great without them.
We should do a whole season where it's different hosts every week just to see what happens and how other people do it.
There's a good chance it'll eventually happen, but no. I guess on that somber note, that's going to do it for this week's Best Darn Diddly Review Show. Once again, thank you all so much for joining us through 9 seasons of The Simpsons so far. 200 episodes as of next week. Crazy to think about. We're going to keep going, at least for the time being, until someone makes us stop or just, questions our sanity. But we haven't gotten to either of those places yet, so please come back again. Can't censor the puzzle truth. Please come back again and join us next week for our 200th episode, a celebration of Phil Hartman.
It will be recorded by the best. Recorded by the best.
And until next time, that's a wrap.